Tonight, we are going to dismantle the most dangerous illusion humanity holds about its future. We are going to strip away the sci-fi dreams and the billionaire promises to see the red planet for what it truly is. And I have to warn you right now, by the end of this journey, you will never look at that bright red dot in the night sky the same way again. You will understand a truth that most dreamers refuse to see. A truth that transforms Mars from a second home into a silent, planetary warning about our own extinction. If you enjoy these deep explorations into the dark reality of the cosmos, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to keep asking the hard questions like this. Let's begin with an uncomfortable truth that our intuition always tries to deny. When you look up at the night sky and see that bright red dot hanging amidst the sea of stars, your brain, a biological machine programmed for millions of years to seek survival, automatically whispers a hopeful story. It says that this is the next place, the backup sanctuary, the second home waiting for humanity to move in. That intuition is so powerful that it eclipses cold reason, making us look at Mars as a promised land. But our intuition is wrong, brutally wrong. If right now I could teleport you from this cozy room to the surface of Mars without a protective suit, you wouldn't have time to admire the majestic beauty of the red dunes. Within less than 15 seconds, before you could even suffocate from oxygen deprivation, a horrifying physical phenomenon would occur. The water lining your lungs, in your eyes, and in your mouth would begin to boil at body temperature. This is not science fiction, but a basic law of thermodynamics. On Mars, the atmospheric pressure is so low that the boiling point of liquids drops to match your blood temperature. Your body, an evolutionary masterpiece designed to survive under Earth's pressure, would betray itself the moment it was cast into that vacuum environment. That is the first and greatest contradiction we must face. Mars looks like an ideal destination, but in reality, it is a giant vacuum chamber with the ability to rip apart human biology in an instant. To understand why we have been deceived for so long, let's peel back the dry data covering this planet. Statistically, Mars is the most accomplished liar in the solar system. It lies on average 225 million kilometers from us, a distance close enough to nurture hope, but far enough to conceal the truth. A day there is 24 hours and 37 minutes long, almost identical to our own, making human circadian rhythms feel at home. It has an axial tilt that creates 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. It has ice caps at both poles, reminiscent of the Arctic and Antarctic. If you look only at the spec sheet, it is the perfect candidate, the lost twin of Earth. But it is precisely those eerily similar data points that have created a perfect mask. This is the image I want you to etch into your mind throughout this journey, the image of the mask. This planet is wearing a camouflage of life, disguising itself as a place that can sustain humans. But beneath that flashy geographical mask is a stark and hostile reality. The atmosphere here is only 1% as thick as Earth's, and 95% of it is toxic carbon dioxide. The average temperature is minus 60 degrees Celsius, colder than Antarctica during its harshest winters. And worst of all, it lacks a protective magnetic field, leaving the planet's surface constantly bombarded by cosmic radiation. Our history, in essence, is the history of being beguiled by this mask. Over a century ago, astronomer Percival Lowell spent long nights gazing through his telescope, swearing he saw crisscrossing canals running across the Martian surface. In the fever dream of his imagination, he sketched a dying civilization, wise beings, struggling in desperation to channel water from the poles to the arid equator. The world back then believed him. We believed that someone was waving from the other side of the darkness, that we were not alone in this vast universe. Humanity's loneliness was so profound that we were willing to see what we wanted to see, transforming optical illusions into great engineering feats. But then in 1965, when the Mariner 4 probe flew by and sent back the first close-up photographs, that dream shattered. There were no cities, no network of canals, no Martian engineers operating water pumps, only a surface pockmarked with craters, cold and dead like the moon. It was a world that had died billions of years ago. The mask fell for the first time, revealing the desiccated skull of a desolate planet. So why today does our imagination reconstruct that mask once again? We see magnificent concept art of glass domes glowing with light, modern cities rising amidst the red desert. We hear tech billionaires waxing lyrical with ironclad conviction about settling 1 million people there by 2050. We are intoxicated by the prospect of becoming a multiplanetary species as a sedative for our existential anxiety. Although science has proven its extreme harshness, we still deliberately rouge the cheeks of a corpse. When we descend to the deepest level of meaning, we are forced to ask ourselves, why does humanity crave Mars so much, despite its obvious biological hostility? It is not just because we love science, nor simply because we carry the gene for exploration in our blood. The truth is much starker. We want to go to Mars because we are afraid. Deep within the collective subconscious of humanity lies a terrifying fear of extinction. We see what happened to the dinosaurs. We feel the fragility of Earth's climate, the depletion of resources, and the risk of our own self-destruction. And Mars appears not as a tourist destination, but as a final escape hatch. We believe the story that if Earth burns, we can flee to the neighbor's house, that humanity can copy life and paste it onto another surface. The Red Dream, in reality, is not a dream of expansion and conquest. It is a dream of escape. We are trying to convince ourselves that we have a backup plan, that our existence is not solely tethered to this fragile blue marble. But what happens if I tell you that the neighbor's house is not a shelter, but a planetary-scale crime scene? That Mars is not the bright future waiting for us, but a cold corpse warning us of a much more brutal law of the universe? Hold tight to that image of the mask, because as we step further into the darkness, we will no longer hear sweet promises, but only the absolute silence of a world stripped of life. On Earth, we are accustomed to an unwritten law of nature. Grandeur always comes with sound. A majestic waterfall must roar, a great storm must scream, and the vast ocean never ceases the sound of waves crashing against the rocky shore. Intuition tells us that energy is proportional to noise, that a place with rugged and violent terrain must surely be a symphony of nature. But when stepping foot on Mars, that intuition is once again strangled by the universe. Here, ultimate grandeur exists in parallel with absolute silence. It is a paradox that makes any witness shudder, a silence that brings not peace, but a terror of isolation. Imagine you are standing on the edge of Valles Marineris. To visualize its scale, forget America's famous Grand Canyon, because the Grand Canyon, if placed here, would look like a small crack in the sidewalk. Valles Marineris is a gigantic scar slashing across the face of the planet, over 4,000 kilometers long, enough to stretch from New York to Los Angeles, and up to 7 kilometers deep, where you could stack Mount Everest inside and still not reach the rim. Across the horizon stands Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system, 3 times the height of Mount Everest, reaching up through the thin atmosphere to touch the vacuum of space. Before such an overwhelming and violent landscape, you expect to hear the wind howling through the ravines, the rumble of landslides echoing from the canyon floor. But no, all is silence. A thick, oppressive, unnatural silence. The cause lies in the physics of death. The atmosphere of Mars is too thin, the density of matter too low to transmit sound over distances. On Earth, gas molecules are packed closely together, transmitting the energy of sound like falling dominoes. But here, the molecules are scattered and lonely, causing sound to die instantly upon leaving its source. If you try to scream here, your scream will not echo. It will fall flat to the ground at your feet like a heavy stone. It is in that moment that the mask of Mars slips once again. From a distance, the red dunes and majestic canyons make us imagine a desert on Earth, a harsh but still vibrant place. But this silence exposes the truth. This is not the stillness of a summer noon, but the stillness of a grave. Dust storms can engulf the entire planet, blotting out the sun, yet they occur in a ghostly silence, as if you are watching an apocalypse movie, but someone pressed the mute button. The history of this planet was not always this quiet. There was a time when these volcanoes erupted violently, rending the planet's crust, and giant floods surged through Valles Marineris, creating sounds that shook a corner of the galaxy. That was when Mars was alive, when it had a geologic heartbeat, when there was movement. But now, all that remains are relics. Rocks lie unmoving for millions of years. Dry riverbeds no longer trickle. Time here seems to have frozen solid, preserving intact the scene of a death that occurred millions of years ago. Standing amidst the silence of the sands, our imagination does not soar. Instead, it recoils in the cold. We realize that sound, which we sometimes deem a nuisance on Earth, the car horns, the drills, the urban clamor, is, in essence, the soundtrack of life. Noise is proof of collision, of interaction, of energy in flow. Yet here, the grandeur of Olympus Mons or Valles Marineris becomes meaningless because no one hears it, nothing responds. It resembles a masterpiece displayed in a room permanently locked away, beautiful yet soulless. The meaning of this silence is a brutal wake-up call. It reminds us that the universe is under no obligation to be noisy or vibrant for our sake. The natural state of the cosmos is cold, vacuum, and silence. The raucous life on Earth is the anomaly, a rare and fragile exception. Mars hides nothing from us. It lays bare the entire truth through its muteness. It is a corpse unable to speak, yet its very silence screams a message that the death of a planet does not occur with a bang, but in the gradual extinguishing of every sound. Until all that remains is the faint friction of wind against the eternal red dust. Water, in our consciousness, has always been a symbol of softness, yet resilience, the eternal wellspring of life. We cling to the adage that dripping water hollows out stone, believing that hard rock must eventually yield to the persistence of the flow. But here, on this desolate planet, that law has been ruthlessly inverted. The rock remains, arrogant and sharp-edged, while the water has admitted defeat and vanished completely. This is the most heartbreaking paradox of Mars, a planet awash in the fingerprints of water, yet possessing not a single drop of liquid to quench the thirst of the land. When the Curiosity rover beamed back close-up images of the ground at Gale Crater, geologists on Earth fell silent. They saw round, smooth pebbles scattered across the red dust. On Earth, stones of such shape cannot be born naturally of wind or volcanoes. They are crafted by a single sculptor, the tumbling and erosion within the continuous flow of rivers over thousands of years. Dry riverbeds winding like dead blood vessels, colossal valleys eroded by ancient cataclysms, and layers of clay sediment all stand as irrefutable forensic evidence. The data declares that Mars once possessed an ocean covering a third of its northern hemisphere, deeper even than our own Atlantic. But now, the desiccated mask of the desert has perfectly concealed that glorious past. Gazing into those barren riverbeds, we see not merely geological structures, we witness the phantom pain of a planet. Like a soldier whose leg has been amputated yet still feels the ache in his missing toes, Mars retains the physical form of rivers, though the soul of the water has been stripped away. It is a mummy preserved in the deep freeze, where the memory of water is more palpable than the reality of the dust. Let your imagination transport you back 4 billion years. Back then, Mars was not the red planet. It was the second blue planet of the solar system. Had you stood there at that moment, you would have heard the waves lapping against the shore, felt the humidity of rain showers, and watched fluffy clouds drifting lazily across a sky thick with a protective atmosphere. It was once a potential paradise, a healthy and vibrant twin to Earth. So where did the water go? It did not simply evaporate or seep into the ground. It was murdered. When the magnetic field weakened, the solar wind arrived like an invisible thief, stripping away water molecules in the upper atmosphere, one by one, ripping apart hydrogen and oxygen, and casting them into the eternal cold of space. The ghost of water haunts this planet, not to tell a story of life in waiting, but to recount a tale of irreversible loss. It reminds us that the vast oceans of Earth are not an immutable given. They are a fragile privilege that can be stripped away at any moment by indifferent cosmic mechanisms. Gazing upon the dead riverbeds of Mars, we do not see a pool waiting to be refilled. We see a warning carved in stone about how quickly a paradise can become a hell. We instinctively fear the trembling of the earth. When a volcano erupts or the ground shakes, our primal brain screams danger, longing for a world that is solid, immovable, and eternally calm. We equate geological silence with safety. But here, in the graveyard of the solar system, that intuition is turned upside down. On Mars, the absolute stillness of the ground is not a sign of peace. It is the definitive clinical evidence of death. A living planet must be violent, churning, and molten at its center. The silence we perceive today is simply the flat line of a pulse that stopped billions of years ago. This is the invisible tragedy hiding behind the red mask. While the surface captivates us with its frozen dunes and majestic peaks, the true catastrophe lies thousands of kilometers beneath the crust. Mars is a victim of its own size. Being only half the diameter of Earth, it possessed a smaller internal engine and a limited reservoir of primordial heat. According to the ruthless laws of thermodynamics, smaller bodies lose heat faster than larger ones. Roughly 4 billion years ago, while Earth's core remained a roaring furnace of liquid iron, generating the magnetic field that acts as our shield, Mars's core began to stutter and freeze. The dynamo effect, the swirling motion of conductive fluids that generates a planetary magnetic field, ground to a halt. In that moment, the planet's heart stopped beating. It didn't make a sound, but the consequences were apocalyptic. Without a molten, churning core, Mars lost its global magnetic field, its cosmic immune system. On Earth, this invisible force field deflects the lethal streams of solar radiation, protecting our atmosphere and our DNA. When Mars's core solidified, that shield evaporated. The planet was left naked, utterly defenseless against the predatory hunger of the sun. Imagine standing on the surface of ancient Mars at that tipping point in history. You would not have felt the ground shake, but if you could see the invisible, you would have witnessed the most terrifying event in planetary history. The auroras, those shimmering curtains of light that danced across the global sky, signaling the deflection of solar particles, would have flickered and dimmed. As the magnetic field collapsed, the sky would have begun to change. The gentle, protective atmosphere, no longer held in place by the magnetic bubble, began to bleed away into the vacuum, stripped layer by layer by the relentless solar wind. The oceans didn't just dry up, the pressure holding them down vanished. The stillness of the Martian landscape today is a monument to this internal failure. It teaches us a brutal lesson about the cost of existence. We complain about the shifting tectonic plates and the fiery temper of our own planet, forgetting that this geological violence is the very thing keeping us alive. Mars is a cautionary tale written in cold iron and stone, reminding us that in the cold equation of the cosmos, stability is synonymous with death. The red planet didn't die because of a catastrophe that fell from the sky. It died because its fire went out from within. We have culturally conditioned ourselves to worship the sun as the ultimate benevolent force, the warm provider that wakes the flowers and fuels our crops. Our intuition tells us that darkness is the enemy and light is the savior. But in the ruthless vacuum of space, this adoration is a dangerous naivety. For Mars, the sun was not a nurturing mother. It was a relentless predator that slowly devoured its own child. The star that gives us life is also a nuclear cannon, firing a continuous stream of charged particles at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and without a shield, nothing can survive its touch. Once the Martian core froze and the magnetic shield collapsed, the planet was left exposed to this solar wind. It was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, agonizing theft that took place over billions of years. Imagine a cosmic sandblaster trained on a fragile sphere of gas. Day after day, eon after eon, the high-energy particles from the sun slammed into the upper atmosphere of Mars, knocking oxygen and carbon dioxide molecules loose and flinging them into the deep void. Data from the MAVEN spacecraft has reconstructed this crime scene, revealing that Mars was stripped of its air atom by atom, a planetary suffocation in slow motion. This is where the mask of the red planet is most deceptive. When we look at that rusty horizon, we see a peaceful, static desert. We do not see the violence of the theft that is still happening right now. The thin, wispy atmosphere that remains is just the tattered rags of a once thick blanket that kept the planet warm and wet. The sun stole the pressure that allowed liquid water to exist, effectively boiling the oceans into space, not with heat, but with the vacuum it created. Transport your mind back to that era of loss. If you had stood on the surface then, you would have watched the sky transform from a deep, protective blue similar to Earth's into the pale, thin pink of a dying world. You would have witnessed the great transition from a greenhouse to an icebox. It is a terrifying intimacy to realize that the same star that kisses your skin on a summer day on Earth is the same beast that flayed Mars alive. It reminds us that our survival is not guaranteed by the sun's kindness, but by the lucky, invisible magnetic armor that stands between us. We cling to the comforting illusion that life is the default setting of the universe, that existence is a sturdy fortress, and death is merely an unfortunate breach of the walls. We believe that if we just try hard enough, we can maintain the status quo forever. But the cold mathematics of Mars shatters this naivety. The universe does not favor complex systems. It favors chaos, dust, and equilibrium. The default state of reality is not the vibrant pulse of a rainforest, but the frozen silence of a vacuum. Life is not the rule. It is a freakish, energy-expensive exception that the cosmos is constantly trying to correct. This is the point of no return. It is not a line on a map, but a boundary in thermodynamics. There came a specific, unrecorded day in Martian history when the planet's energy budget finally went bankrupt. The core cooled just 1 degree too much. The atmosphere thinned just 1 molecule beyond the limit of recovery. In that moment, the planet entered a runaway feedback loop of death. The thinner air led to colder temperatures, which froze the remaining water, which reflected more sunlight, which made it even colder. It was a spiral into oblivion that no technology, no prayer, and no engineering could reverse. When we stare at the red mask today, we are not looking at a tragedy that could have been avoided. We are looking at the inevitable victory of entropy. Mars did not die because it was unlucky. It died because it obeyed the second law of thermodynamics. It returned to the dust from which it came. This realization induces a profound vertigo because it forces us to look down at the ground beneath our own feet. We realize that Earth is not a fortress. It is a tightrope walker, swaying over the same abyss, fighting the same gravity that pulled Mars down. The difference is not that we are immune. The difference is simply that we haven't fallen yet, and our star's voracious hunger. We often mistake a telescope for a map, believing it shows us where things are located in the vastness of geography. We think of Mars as a destination, a neighbor living down the street in the solar subdivision. But this intuition is a comforting lie that obscures the terrifying nature of the cosmos. A telescope is not a map. It is a time machine. When we gaze across the void at the red planet, we are not looking at a different place. We are staring into a cruel mirror that reflects our own inevitable future. We are looking at a ghost of what we will become. The data is irrefutable and ruthless. Earth and Mars were born from the same primordial dust cloud, forged in the same violence, and gifted with the same initial spark of heat. They are siblings separated only by mass and luck. Mars, being smaller, simply raced through its life cycle faster. It burned through its internal fuel, exhausted its magnetic vigor, and succumbed to the cold. Earth is merely lagging behind on the exact same trajectory. Our core is cooling, slowly but surely. Our sun is expanding, slowly but surely. The physics that murdered Mars are already at work beneath our feet and above our heads, ticking away with the patience of eternity. This is where the mask of the alien world falls away completely. For centuries, we looked at the red face of Mars and felt a sense of detachment, thinking it was just a strange, hostile rock. But when the mask drops, we realize with a shudder that we are looking at our own skull. The dry riverbeds are the future of the Amazon. The silent volcanoes are the destiny of the Ring of Fire. The thin, poisonous atmosphere is the final fate of our blue sky. Imagine standing on the dunes of Mars, looking back at the Earth, that pale blue dot suspended in the sunbeam. From that vantage point, you are not seeing a separate world. You are seeing the before picture while standing in the after. The cruelty of this mirror is that it shows us the end of the story while we are still in the middle of the chapter. It strips away the illusion of permanence that allows us to sleep at night. We build our cities and write our histories as if they will last forever. But Mars stands there, a frozen, silent tombstone, whispering the ultimate truth that everything we love is built on a temporary reprieve from the dark. The tragedy is not that Mars died. The tragedy is that it is showing us how we will die. Our survival instinct screams that hope is a virtue, that the refusal to give up is what makes us human. We tell ourselves that as long as we keep striving, there is a future where our legacy endures. But looking at the frozen wasteland of Mars, this biological optimism begins to look less like courage and more like a cognitive error. The universe operates on a timeline that renders human ambition statistically insignificant. If the laws of physics dictate that every planetary heart eventually stops beating and every atmosphere eventually bleeds away, then our struggle is not a heroic journey. It is merely a delay of execution. The logic of the cosmos is ruthless. Mars spent billions of years evolving geology, churning its mantle, perhaps even harboring the precursors of life, only to have it all erased by the solar wind. It didn't matter how hard the planet tried to exist. The outcome was fixed by the indifference of thermodynamics. When we finally remove the mask of our own self-importance, we are left with a terrifying syllogism. If the most majestic worlds turn to dust, then our cities, our art, and our memories are just temporary arrangements of atoms waiting to be scattered. Why expand to the stars if we are just spreading the infection of our inevitable demise? Why fight to save a biosphere that is doomed by the lifespan of its own sun? It feels intellectually superior to accept this darkness, to conclude that since the final score is 0, the game isn't worth playing. We appear to be nothing more than mold growing on a cooling rock, pretending that our existence has a narrative arc. The silence of Mars suggests that the universe doesn't care about our stories, and perhaps neither should we. It invites us to lie down in the dust and wait for the cold, convinced that surrender is the only honest response to the sheer scale of infinity. We intuitively believe that because a flower eventually wilts, its bloom was a deception, and that permanence is the only true metric of value. But standing before the cosmic graveyard of Mars, this logic collapses under its own weight. I spent years paralyzed by the scar of this realization, staring at the data of atmospheric escape and core solidification, convinced that the universe was a machine designed to crush hope. I thought the red planet was mocking us, showing us that our struggle to survive was futile against the second law of thermodynamics. But I was reading the map backward. When the mask of the red planet falls away, revealing the frozen bone beneath, it does not devalue Earth. It consecrates it. In art, the negative space is what defines the subject. In the cosmos, the dead worlds define the living ones. Mars is the dark, infinite velvet upon which the singular blue jewel of Earth is displayed. The fact that the universe naturally trends toward cold, dead silence does not mean our noisy, chaotic existence is meaningless. It means we are a statistical miracle. We are the anomaly. The scar of knowing we are finite is not a wound. It is an opening. It allows us to see that the rarity of our breath is what gives it weight. We are not fighting a losing battle against the void. We are the universe's only victory against it. We often mistake size for significance, believing that because we are small, we are irrelevant. But the frozen face of Mars teaches us that in a universe defined by death, life is the only metric that counts. You are standing at a crossroads tonight, looking up at the same red dot that deceived generations. When the mask of the red planet drops, revealing the graveyard beneath, you are left with a binary choice that defines your existence. You can choose to look at that dead world and let the scale of its failure crush you, accepting the nihilistic comfort that since everything dies, nothing matters. Or you can make the harder choice. You can let the silence of Mars terrify you into a profound appreciation. If the universe is a dark, cold ocean, Earth is the only life raft still afloat in our visual horizon. This perspective shifts the burden. You are no longer a victim of cosmic indifference. You are a guardian of the anomaly. The silence of our neighbor does not mean we are alone in a scary way. It means we are alone in a precious way. The choice is yours. Do you see only the abyss, or do you see the darkness as the necessary contrast that makes the light of our world burn so agonizingly bright? We are biologically wired to scream for help when lost, expecting a savior to answer. We project this infantile need onto the cosmos, scanning the radio frequencies for a sign that we are not the only children in the nursery. But the silence of Mars forces us to grow up. The data confirms that for millions of kilometers in every direction, the lights are out. There is no galactic federation waiting to invite us in. There is only rock, ice, and vacuum. This realization strips the final layer off the mask. We are not just exploring a neighbor. We are staring into the face of our own absolute solitude. When Voyager 1 turned its camera around and captured Earth as a single pixel suspended in a sunbeam, it killed the fantasy of rescue. It revealed that we are effectively orphans in the dark. But there is a profound dignity in this status. An orphan does not wait to be saved. An orphan learns to build their own shelter. Imagine standing on the rusty plains of Mars, looking up at that faint blue star, which is Earth. The fear of isolation evaporates, replaced by a fierce, protective pride. We are alone, yes, but we are the only ones keeping the lights on in this sector of the galaxy. Mature solitude is the acceptance that no one is coming to save us from ourselves. There is no plan B, no backup drive for civilization. This isolation is not a prison. It is a mandate. It tells us that we must be the adults in the room, the sole custodians of meaning in a silent universe. We are conditioned to believe that salvation always lies just beyond the horizon, that a new world will solve the failures of the old. We look to the stars with a desperate hope, expecting them to embrace us. But standing at the end of this journey, the intuition of exploration is inverted. The most profound sight on Mars is not the alien landscape, but the view back home. From here, the Earth is reduced to a single, trembling pixel of blue light suspended in a sunbeam. The mask of the red planet has finally fallen, and it reveals that there is no backup drive for humanity. Mars is not a second chance. It is a silent monument to what happens when a planet loses its fight against the void. This realization does not bring despair, but a razor-sharp clarity. We are not the conquerors of the galaxy. We are the custodians of a flickering candle in a hurricane. The indifference of the cosmos is what gives our existence its weight. We are the anomaly, the rare and precious error in the code of entropy. As the screen fades to black, do not look up to the stars to find your savior. Look down at your own hands, for they are the only things holding the flame that keeps the infinite darkness at bay.